This week on The Futurists, Jeffrey Morris and Kevin J. Anderson is in the hosting chair.
Being there at the tail end of the civil rights movement and some of the things that were going on in the 1970s, there was still quite a bit of strife still going on. And I would look at shows like Star Trek and Space 1999, and I'd see the futures depicted in those shows and go, wow, it's going to get better.
Welcome back to The Futurists. I am your host, Brett King. It's great to be in the home territory for a little bit. Robert is not joining us today because I've got a special guest who's joining me in the hosting chair. He's a many-time guest on the show, and recently we were working together at the Futurist X Summit in Dubai. Kevin J. Anderson, welcome back to The Futurists.
I'm glad to be here, and boy, this co-host chair is a lot more comfortable than the interrogation chair that we've got our other guest in. So I'm glad to be promoted to this, and I am always happy to be in the futurist chair and to be considered among this company of luminaries, of people who think about the future and the great optimistic things and huge advances and great ideas. And my job as a science fiction writer is to kind of put it on its head and go, but what could go wrong? But that's what makes for good stories, and we want to fix them before disasters. But as co-host, I want to introduce our main guest here, who has been a longtime friend of mine and a visionary and futurist himself, is Jeffrey Morris. He is a director, screenwriter, film designer. We worked together for many years on a new documentary that he has called The Eagle Obsession, about the Eagle spacecraft from the Space 1999 TV show, which I watched when I was a kid and loved it and loved its optimistic view of the future. But also the documentary is about like science fiction in general and how it inspires people to do careers. But Jeffrey and I also worked for many years on a hard science fiction film called Persephone, and we worked on the script and we wrote the novel together, and the film is in production, and lots of exciting stuff we'll talk about.
Oh, wow.
So Jeffrey is our guest, Jeffrey Moore. Oh, and I should also mention he's done other films too, including the animated Parallel Man, and he's got a bunch of other things in the works, Oceanus, and well, I don't want to talk about it all. We'll let Jeffrey talk about it.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate the chance to be here.
Awesome. Where are you based?
I'm in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So
Okay.
Midwest of the US. Yeah.
Is it starting to get cold there yet?
No. It's really fascinating. I moved here 30 years ago, and it's a little over 30 years ago, and the weather's changed drastically. There was, 2 Saturdays ago, it was like 92 degrees here. It was
Wow.
Fahrenheit, So the weather's been changing, and everything.
Yeah, I was saying to my my girlfriend the other day, Julia, that when I first moved to New York, I'm in Bangkok and Dubai now, but when I first moved to New York, it was 2010, and that Christmas we got 19 inches of snow on Christmas Day, to the point where all the cars in the street were, I was on the Upper West Side at the time. All the cars in the streets were covered in snow. I don't think it's snowed in Christmas in New York for 10 years. I think, and it's getting later and later in January, when you get snow, and then you get a flurry, obviously, in February. But the weather's, dramatically changed there. And I don't understand why we still have a debate over climate.
It's pretty amazing to see to literally see the effects of this, right? And to live in a world where people are denying it. Well, it's literally, you could see it happening. It's amazing. And so I have thoughts on why we can't seem to break through this. But yeah.
Well, and the thing that really, I was in Prague a few years ago hiking around with my host, and we went off into the forest, and he just said, boy, 5 years ago, this would have been covered in snow by this time, but it's just so much changing. And to me, it's astonishing that it's happening not just in our lifetime, but in like a decade. It's so obvious in such a short time scale that it's like, that's a nanosecond as far as geological time.
My 22-year-old son, actually, he was telling me about just the things he's noticed that have changed just in his life. So yeah. So, anyway,
Anyway,
So that's good. Sorry for taking us on that tangent, but
I get stuff that needs to be talked about. So
yeah. What are you working on at the moment?
well, we just had the world premiere a couple of nights ago of the movie The Eagle Obsession, which is a project that first launched, I think, in 2023, and it's finally headed. We've been started to do the festival circuit with it and everything. So it's a 90-minute documentary that really showcases he has a different vision of the future 50 years ago. If you go back and you look at the optimism of the original Star Trek and shows like Space 1999, others, there was definitely a vision of the future that was much more. We had, certainly there were dystopic science fiction stories and tales of the time, but there was also a much more optimistic view, and I think that was connected in part with what was happening with the Apollo missions and what was happening in real space exploration and that sort of thing. So this movie it's a documentary, but it's very cinematic, and it's a travelogue where I go and interview people like Kevin and one of the gentlemen who actually walked on the moon, General Charles Dukes. William Shatner's in the film. It's a pretty amazing journey. We use this spaceship, this make-believe spaceship, the Eagle transporter from the show Space 1999, is sort of the through line. But I postulate that a lot of us fell in love with that ship simply because it was reminiscent of the real space technology of the time. And so a lot of us watching that show thought, hey, when I grow up, I'm going to fly spaceships like the one in this show. Personally. So yeah.
Well, Robert Mayer Burnett called it one of the most entertaining, uplifting, and beautifully made documentaries I've ever seen. So that's high praise. And you got official selection at Twin Cities Film Fest, industry award for raw science, official selection of the Outer Rim. This sounds like you're on fire, brother. It looks like it's been a fantastic response.
Yeah, we also won an audience award at this sci-fi film festival in Sydney a couple weeks ago too, which was really pretty amazing. So yeah. So it's been really neat to get the response we got. What I've liked about it the most, and Kevin, he was around during the genesis of this. We talked a lot about the project and what I wanted to do with it, and one of the things that was very important to me was that it wasn't made for the choir. I didn't want this to just be for people who were into science fiction or this TV show. I wanted to open it up to a much broader audience. And that's something that's happened very consistently. We've had people who, I'll have audiences now. We've screened the film like 13 times now. And I've had audiences of all ages. And I've had people who come up to me after and say, I have no interest in science fiction or this sort of thing, but this got me thinking about it finally, or I understand it now. That was one. Kevin, you'd love that. That's something that I've heard. I've actually had several people who were old, like in their 70s, 80s, who watched the film, and they said, I used to chastise my child for loving shows like Star Trek and Lost in Space, and now I feel bad because I understand what my child was actually trying to do, and that was very moving to me that the film has had that kind of impact. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us about young Jeffrey and how you got inspired and how science fiction and not just Space 1999, but I mean you're on this career path, and I've seen so many of the the futuristic like gadgets that you've designed and the little like the movie props you did, other things that you're really looking forward to the future, and you've been kind of trying to make it happen for all of us. So how did that come about?
Well, I think it goes back to, I was small when the Apollo missions were going on, but for some reason I caught the bug, and I 3, 4 years old. I was, my mother would take me to the library, and I'd watch the Apollo missions on TV, the news reports. And I remember, I think something very, very vividly. It was like going to the library when I was, in early part of elementary school, and checking out the books that would talk about NASA's projected missions, not just the missions happening at the time, but the idea that we would be on Mars in the 1980s, that we would have space stations, space colonies. As I got older, I learned about Gerard K. O'Neill and, those sorts of, the visions of The Art of Robert McCall, where he would depict the future, that sort of thing. Those were very, very powerful they really impacted me as a child. My father was an aerospace engineer, and he actually worked on some of the NASA spacesuits and those sorts of things early in his
That's
career.
cool.
Yeah, which was neat. And he and I used to talk a lot about, he would talk about high speed trains and maglev, and he bought me a solar cell when I was a kid that would drive a propeller. So we went to the McMath telescope, the solar telescope in Arizona. That's really futuristic design. Frank Lloyd Wright had a bunch of buildings in our area when I was growing up. So I think seeing all these different things were instrumental in getting me to think a lot about the future as a child. I would also add that, being there at the tail end of the civil rights movement and some of the things that were going on in the 1970s, there was still quite a bit of strife still going on. And I would look at shows like Star Trek and Space 1999, and I'd see the futures depicted in those shows and go, wow, it's going to get better. Things are going to be, and the world is going to improve. And I wanted to be part of that improving world. So I mean, that's kind of the foundational aspect of a lot of it for me. I saw Star Wars like a lot of young people, but I had a different reaction to Star Wars in that those words "a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away," uh, that kind of almost was weird and depressing to me as a child. Like, I wanted to see stories that were about our future, in a lot of ways. I remember seeing the commercials for Star Wars. I was like, "Oh, when is that? Where is that going to be?" And then when I saw it, I was like, "Wait, what?" Um, but I was inspired by Star Wars by the technology and the filmmaking, and I really wanted to understand how movies like Star Wars were being made, and production design and visual effects and that sort of thing. And it was such an interesting time. There were so many new advancements that were occurring and that sort of thing. So um so I ended up seeing that Star Trek the motion picture was incredibly impactful for me. I liked the original Star Trek as a child, but between that 2001 A Space Odyssey, which I also really really liked as a child, um Star Trek motion picture was like the epitomized the future that I wanted to live in. So those are all inspirational aspects for me that drove me to want to become a filmmaker. And at the end of the day, I decided that I was about 12, 13 years old when I decided I want to grow up and make movies about the future that I want to live in. I want to create stories about aspirational futures, positive futures that could actually drive society forward.
I'm
So
glad you said that, because that's really sort of the core objective of why we do this podcast. Is
great.
to try and show the possible futures, and talk to the people who are engineering those futures. So you're a great fit for this. In terms of the filmmaking, how did you learn that art?
So I started. Well, one thing first off, the funny thing is I actually I got a lot of books, The Art of Star Wars. I don't know if Kevin, did you have that book? Do you remember that book?
Oh, I had it. I
Yeah.
studied everything in there.
Yeah, so I got books like The Art of Star Wars, The Art of the Empire Strikes Back. I started learning about who these people were. I started studying who were the different filmmakers who did visual effects. How did they do it? I would get my hands on, obviously it was way before the internet, but it was all about researching and trying to find access. There was a fantastic book magazine called Cinefex that used to come out. I think it was a few times a year, and it would cover in detail how visual effects were done for various films. So I poured through all that stuff, and I started teaching myself how to design and draw spaceships and draw technology and those sorts of things. That was a big part of it. And then my cousin and I used to make Super 8 movies in when was it? I guess junior high, early high school. We did a lot of our own little films, and we taught ourselves how to do visual effects. And so then I ended up going to college for cinematography and political science, and then kind of advanced from there. When I moved to the Twin Cities after college, I decided to launch my own production company, and my focus then was really doing music videos and commercials. And then I moved from there, and I continued to study science, and ended up working with NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory for a number of years, and I did
Cool.
public outreach stuff for them, which was a lot of fun. So it's been an interesting career, a lot of different paths for me. As a matter of fact, it was my NASA connections that actually led me to meeting Kevin. Actually, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I had
awesome.
a NASA person say, "There's this guy I really like you to meet," and we it was funny because
My NASA shirt on.
a Zoom call, Jeffrey, that let's meet each other. And like 2 hours later, we went, we got to go do something.
You got to go do something else. Yeah.
And we did. I was some podcast. It was just a conversation with Jeffrey and Kevin, and we just went on. And we just talked, and we got all this feedback. People like, that's the most fascinating conversation ever. And how did you put that together? I went, I don't know. That's just how we talk whenever we get on the phone, and it's just lots of ideas because he's got so many films in the works and in development that he's got this whole vision of all the films that he wants to make. And but the first big one, I mean, he did Oceanus, which was a short, and he did Parallel Man, which was a animated short. But the documentary is the first one. But the really big one, I think, on his horizon is Persephone, which is
so you guys released this as a novel not that long ago. I read it. It's about colonization or attempted colonization of Proxima B. So this is an exoplanet orbiting our nearest neighboring star, Alpha Centauri. This sort of seems a little bit more accessible, doesn't it? If we're going to talk about interstellar travel, like it's only 4.5 light years away. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if we could get up to 90% of light speed, something like that, that seems like it's almost achievable within the next 100 years. Whereas going to other great candidates like, let's say, some of the Kepler exoplanets, which may have better signatures for being Earth-like, but they're a lot further away. So we're going to need either wormholes or, warp technology or something like that. Whereas,
right.
Theoretically, we could get to Alpha Centauri, with next generation propulsion technologies. In fact, there's some very early plans on to send some micro satellites to Alpha Centauri, right?
The breakthrough.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. The thing. So I read about Proxima B when it was discovered in 2016, and I was really excited by the idea that there was a planet that could potentially be Earth-like, so close to us, and that's what, and the story that started to formulate for me was, the one thing is, first off, I think we're missing good aspirational science fiction these days. There's lots of sci-fi stories that, plenty of dystopia. There's plenty of stories that talk about how we evolve forward and continue bringing all this nastiness with us as we, move forward, the worst aspects of humanity. I wanted to talk about a story that was going to challenge our best aspects. And I really, I was thinking, instead of flipping the alien thing on its head and where we're the aliens and we're the problem and we're the invaders, and that was something that I thought was really, really important, because it is an aspect as we move forward and go out into the universe. We have to look at that, right? Like what are we bringing as we go forward? Are we going to be true explorers and scientists and people who are out there to gain knowledge, or are we going to be the empire? Are we going to be conquerors? Are we going to be destroyers? Right? That's a choice that we have to make, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's something, if you look historically at, colonization, and human effect on that, unfortunately, there's some not great precedents, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I also, one of the things that I wanted to do, and that Kevin, I think you really enjoyed exploring with me as we went further, was the idea that you can have life that it's not life as we know it. Right. I mean, that's part of this too, is like having, one of the things that's really, that I've struggled with, I was the kid watching the cantina scene in Star Wars and grumbling, going, wait a minute, all those different aliens they all can breathe the same air, and they can all be in the same, and they all want to drink at bars, and they all want to, it's like, kind of like, and this idea that all the life in the universe, most of it is humanoid, and it all kind of is bipedal, and it all has, you know what I mean? But it just has some funny little things go. You know what I mean? It was like, come on, we're gonna run into stuff out there. You think about the Earth, the diversity of life, even on our own planet, let alone what we could imagine that would evolve in another, ecosystem. Right? It's pretty profound. And so the idea that there could be something there on a planet like Proxima B that we just miss, we just completely miss it, and we don't realize it. I think that's
we don't realize that's life. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, now with CGI improving, we are starting to see, I think, more diverse depiction of aliens. So, Arrival, with the octopods, and then, most recently, it's not out yet, but soon, Hail Mary,
Sure. Yeah.
so I think, maybe that, even if you think about, the robotic forms, the android forms, they generally had humanoid shapes, from Robbie the Robot, because there was an operator.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there was a limitation. I would agree that there's a limitation due to visual effects, and special effects in terms of what was possible. And now we can get into more. I've always wanted to tell a story about alien life that's Carl Sagan, when he postulated the idea of those hunters, floaters, and sinkers, those different types of life forms in a gas giant atmosphere. Could you imagine a Pixar type film? That's one of the stories I want to tell someday.
That's cool.
Well, that's one of the things that I really enjoy about Star Trek, because yes, we have aliens that were just Vulcans with pointy ears, but they also had episodes like the Lights of Zetar, which are just like flickering energy things that are trying to understand humans, and we're in the way. And it was unlike Lost in Space, where it was the rubber monster of the week, and Star Trek had like the giant germ in the galaxy and other.
Yeah, I love that episode. That was awesome. And then also the Horda. Right, the
rock creek.
That was really cool. Yeah, so all those things were neat, and everything. But the idea of us going to Proxima B and then discovering something like that. The other thing that I thought was really important for this story was, what would be your perspective? What would your perspective be if you were born on a spaceship and you'd never been to Earth, versus someone who left Earth behind? You'd have very, very different views of what was forward, what was backward, that sort of thing, right? It's almost like for someone born on board the ship, it's like Earth is almost like a legend to them, right?
Yeah,
it's a historical idea. So go ahead, Kevin.
Well, and I was going to say, and the other really, really profound question in Persephone is, so where this is the last remnants of humanity, and this is our last chance. So if we can't settle this planet, we're extinct. And it turns out that in order for the humans to make that planet livable, we would have to kill the only thing that's living there. And so the moral question is, I mean, that's literally a crisis in the book. The moral question is, do we have the right to exterminate this life form to preserve our own? And that's the big debate. And in fact, I think Jeffrey and
I think about those sort of things, and I think how prescient, the sort of prime directive was in Star Trek. It was quite an interesting, when we haven't met any, aliens or alternative intelligences, and yet to have that sort of the moral considerations, that sort of that basis of justice. But I think it's a good extension from the days of Columbus.
We did the same thing. It's like the colonizers. It's like, well, we know that you've settled here in the Southwest, but we kind of want this land, so go somewhere else. And
I saw some commentary on this about X. I don't try and get on X too much; it depresses me too much. But someone saying that the founding fathers, because someone said they were immigrants. No, they weren't immigrants; they were settlers. And it's like, well, yeah, settlers coming in to sort of, come in and make a claim on that land, and it's the same sort of issue that you're talking about in Persephone, is how do you navigate that? And there's even that internal battle between the crew on, in terms of, one saying let's take a bit more time to understand, what these structures really are, and if they're intelligent, and someone else sort of saying, but we've got our mission. Our mission is to get humanity to colonize this planet, and let's move forward. It's I think it was a nice way that you guys depicted that. How where is the production at on the movie?
Well, the thing with this is it's had a lot of starts and stops. Unfortunately, when Kevin and I started. I had started the film. The film has been in development since 2018, and it's one of those things that one of those unspoken truths of Hollywood is that there are a lot of projects that we're seeing that takes sometimes 10. I think what is the average film takes 8 years to get made usually. Some are taking 15 to 20. It all depends, right? Very few are fast tracks like that. So we've had some ups and downs. We were very close to a start, and then COVID derailed us. We've had some other things that have happened that evolved. So right now we're on path to make the film in late 2026 in Switzerland. That's
nice.
Yeah, so there's
Awesome.
a new studio being built in Switzerland with the LED volumes and new technology and stuff.
Because Jeff like Proxima B. That's we're gonna film it on location, just right.
Yeah.
I mean, we can probably talk about this in the next segment, some of the technology, but the virtual walls and everything that you can make, you can do so many things in film now that you just couldn't even conceive of 5 years ago. And you can be anywhere and create like the Mandalorian we've seen. That was all just virtual and amazing stuff. So,
well, Jeff, let's have a quick break. But before the break, we like to do something called the quick fire round. Just short, punchy answers to some questions to help our listeners get to know you a little better. So here we go. This is the lightning round. What was the first science fiction you remembered being exposed to in media?
The show called UFO, Jerry Anderson series, and I watched it with my father when I was 4 years old. That's the first.
Very cool. Oh, that's a great core memory. What technology do you think has most changed humanity?
The printing press.
Good answer. Is there a futurist, a sci-fi author, a movie maker, or entrepreneur that's really particularly influenced you, and why?
Well, man, I'm going to say Carl Sagan. He doesn't necessarily fit what you're saying, but I would say Carl Sagan has been biggest influence in that he and his series Cosmos in 1980, they were popularizing ideas about reason and this continuum of knowledge and the use of visual effects and it was an amazing accomplishment and achievement, and I think we need more Cosmos.
Yeah, Sagan was amazing. All right, so last question. Is there a science fiction story that is most representative of the future that you hope for?
Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Very good. Well, we get that answer quite a bit, so that's a good one. All right, well, you're listening to The Futurists. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Jeffrey Morris and Kevin J. Anderson after the break. Provoke Media is proud to sponsor, produce, and support the Futurist podcast. Provoke.fm is a global podcast network and content creation company with the world's leading fintech podcast and radio show, Breaking Banks. And of course, its spin-off podcast, Breaking Banks Europe, Breaking Banks Asia Pacific. But we also produce the official Finovate podcast, Tech on Reg, and Emerge Everywhere, the podcast of the Financial Health Network. For information about all our podcasts, go to provoke.fm or check out Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show.
Welcome back to the Futurists podcast. I am Kevin J. Anderson, the guest host this week, along with Brett King. And our guest is filmmaker and futurist Jeffrey Morris. And we're talking about his visions of the future, his documentary, The Eagle Obsession, as well as the hard science fiction film Persephone that is in production. And in fact, we were just talking about in the previous conversation about how filmmaking technology has changed and how we can make films realize what's in our imagination. And you've had so many cool designs of the future. I've looked at all of your production stuff, and you're not just the guy that writes a script and lets somebody else make the movie. You've got, yeah, I mean, you designed a portable handheld coffee maker for Stephanie, and what I really love that you did in
You
Persephone
could do it, Monica.
is these the suit pods. I can't remember what we talked about them, but they're basically like a space suit that's a little bit bigger, so it's a vehicle as well. And
Oh,
tell us
sure.
about those. I loved those when
Oh, yeah. Well, so those were based on a design that I saw that Werner von Braun came up with years ago called a bottle suit. So the idea, it's like it's a spacesuit, but it's really more a little personal spaceship in a lot of ways. So you basically jump on board this thing, and it snugly fits you, right? But it also has all of the manipulator arms, the controls, and everything. So it allows you to basically fly around in space and actually I don't know, manipulate objects, construct things, build, stuff. It's really a cool idea. So you could look that up. It's called a bottle suit. And so what I did is that I made an updated version of that for Persephone, which I think is a lot of fun. So yeah,
That's cool.
that's pretty.
I listened to the masterclass of Chris Hadfield, and he spoke about the problems he had in the, with the extravehicular activity with his suit when there was a leak and so forth. But he described it as, as a mini spacesuit, which I thought is interesting because, you do have to protect yourself in the same way you would from in a spaceship. But to start thinking about how you can extend on that. Obviously, one of the themes we've seen in science fiction is thinner, much more flexible types of suits. But then you also have sort of the extension of the suit paradigm with the remote operating pods and things like that in 2001, and
Absolutely.
yeah. So and theoretically. We could see sort of a fusion of ship and human with the
Absolutely.
technologies we're looking at now.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I've seen some designs for Mars and also for the lunar surface where it's almost like you're climbing into this spacesuit that's kind of connected to the habitat in a way. It's pretty cool. There's stuff like that they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to say that, I think one of the important things is I think science fiction movies cost too much. I don't think there's a reason why they should cost as much as they do. And one of the things that it's been very important to me as a filmmaker, um, I think I look at it as a producer first, and I say, all right, what's my target budget? And when I'm developing a story, I try to develop screenplays and concepts that are going to align with the budget that's my target. So I actually develop the production design while I'm also developing the screenplay and outlining it. So in other words, we don't, yeah, obviously with a script you can say, and then 1,000 people come across the hill, right? And nowadays with CG you can do that pretty easily. But the point is, that's expensive. You can say anything in a script, but the question is, can you execute it, right? And so one of the things that for me, with especially science fiction, I have these stories that have big ideas, but they're more contained, having a smaller number of characters, sets, locations, and then really fleshing those worlds out. There's a movie called Moon that was made, came out.
Yeah, great movie.
Yeah, that movie, right? Moon was phenomenal, and that was another movie that was made for like $5 billion. It's possible to tell great stories with cool sets, technology, locations, without having to spend, like what this recent Tron movie that just came out that cost $180 million. So
I mean, it was a pretty cool movie, but still,
I did actually. I'm actually very bummed by how it's tanked at the box office, because I actually thought it was a good movie. But costing $180 million, you're setting a bar very high in terms of recouping that cost, and then usually you spend at least half that budget on print and advertising, marketing. That's a lot.
Sometimes the set, I'm thinking right in my head, like the Ant-Man Quantumania movie where they're down and I just went, I can barely watch this. There's so much stuff going on all over the place. And I really loved the old Outer Limits TV show, which they told really great stories. And yeah, they had like rubber monsters in it, but it wasn't about the monsters or special effects. It was about the great story instead of the effects.
Exactly.
I mean, we're still regurgitating some of those stories, and even now with even with Tron, Ares, and so forth, we are taking these old concepts, which were really revolutionary in terms of storytelling, and we're sort of rehashing them, which is. But it's actually David Brin made a really interesting. I don't know if you remember this, Kevin, when we were having a conversation on one of the podcasts, but he made an observation that one of the reasons that we have so much dystopian sci-fi is it's much cheaper to produce dystopian movies than it is utopian movies. And now, we don't have those sort of cost limitations with the screens and the technologies and so forth. So it'd be nice to see a little bit more optimistic sci-fi, right?
I think we have a creativity limitation with Hollywood right now, just to be honest. I think we need to have more open minds to sharing, to creating more positive visions of the future. And it's something that I think we're starving for. One of the things that I was very happy about with this documentary we made is we actually had originally planned to have a section of it that got a lot more dark and talked about dystopia, and we decided to pull it out of the film. And one of the things we've had audiences come away with is they feel a sense of renewed hope after watching this film because of seeing these earlier visions of the future. And I just feel like there's, getting back to aspirational characters, situations, positive, I'm actually planning to do a sequel to The Eagle Obsession about Star Trek: The Next Generation, completely focused on that and its cultural impact. That's I'm hoping to make that my next film, and it's I really feel like it's time for some positive science fiction. It's like there's all kinds of great movies and worlds that have been depicted in the last 20, 30 years, but they aren't worlds that I'd want to live in.
Yeah.
I think The Expanse is a fantastic story. I read the books before I seen the show and everything, and I like the show. But man, that's a pretty dark world.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we have to build better maps, positive maps to the future also, if we want to be able to aspire to them. And I think it's super important. So,
sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
In defense of science fiction, though, that one of the other purposes is to show people, if you don't do something about it, this is going to be your future, and you don't want that. So it's sort of.
I agree with you on that. The only sad part is we're watching a world where it seems like it's almost like more of a roadmap. I mean, you literally have you have tech billionaires right now who are citing dystopic science fiction, and it seems like they're missing the point. They're literally like, this is awesome. It's like, no, that was supposed to be bad. It's like, it's like that wasn't a roadmap to, you know what I mean? It's that I think so I absolutely agree with you, Kevin. I think that science fiction is a wonderful way to say, let's not do this. Let's talk about, let's think about it. Have you guys familiar at all with the new book? There's a book about the potential dangers of artificial superintelligence. It's called If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. Everybody Dies. I think it's called. And it's a fantastic book. I just finished it last night, and I highly recommend you both read it if you get a chance to read it.
I'm a little.
You know who the author is?
It's Eliezer Yudkowsky and Nate Suarez. Nate Suarez. Yeah, and it's a very lauded book. It's not sensationalistic. It's not trying to be alarmist. These guys are AI ethicists who have basically come together to say, we have a huge problem here that's not being addressed, and if we don't address it, it could lead to really, really bad things. And the reason I wanted to get a chance to promote that every chance I get, because I think people need to talk about this. That's exactly what you're talking about, Kevin. And this is not just science fiction. We're literally on the brink of some amazing things could be very positive, but they can be incredibly destructive if done incorrectly.
Well, when we were at the Dubai conference, and I sat in on the AI talks and the artificial superintelligence, and listening to some of the people going, yes, and we're going to do this and do this, and I was in the seat going, but.
Right. Well, I think I often think about the Butlerian jihad, the stuff that you guys wrote and everything, right? I mean, it's like, anyway, I just want to recommend you guys read that book. It's a great read. So.
Well, one of my first novel was called Resurrection Inc., and it was 1988. And it strikingly has some real parallels right now that obviously were unintended when I wrote it. But the concept of Resurrection Inc. is that instead of building robots for everything, human bodies are perfectly good robot machines. And so they just jumpstart intact dead bodies to be servants to dig ditches and handle toxic waste and whatever. But the idea of it was the guy who invents this technology is these servants will then do all of the grunt work for everybody, so we'll have all the time in the world to write poetry and do paintings and do the stuff humans are supposed to do. And then of course what happens is there's huge unrest because most people won't do that.
Yeah.
Most people sit around and go, I'm bored and I don't have anything to do, I have no purpose in life. And I'm hearing the same things about AI, that it's going to take away all of the hard grunt work jobs so that we'll have the freedom to do what humans can do best. And I go, well, no, most humans are kind of jerks and they don't want to spend their time bettering humanity. And
You know, I mean, I debated this in my last book, Kevin, and you know, well, actually not my last book, my second last book, which was on the rise of techno-socialism. But the really interesting results came from all of these UBI trials globally, which is there's been about 70. Well, there's probably been more since we wrote it, but and one of the highlights was that people get involved at much higher rates in community-based activity. So like almost twice what the regular, statistics show. And they start their own businesses at 3 times a higher rate than the general population. So it gives me a little bit of hope, that UBI or AI, driven models like this could free us up to do more interesting things. Dave Shapiro calls it the meaning and purpose economy, that will have jobs that don't have an economic component like they do today, but we'll choose a job or career where we feel we can make the most difference. But that does require us to educate the world differently.
Yes. Yeah.
In that, that your career isn't about economics anymore. Your career as a human, what the intent of your work should be, what are you going to contribute to society? What are you going to contribute to the future of humanity? And this is where sci-fi has a great, role in sort of storytelling.
I cannot agree more. I think it's interesting. Obviously we've got a lot of political strife here in the United States. And the one thing that I find missing, no matter which side of the debate, is this idea of like, where is the reasoning? Where is the critical thinking? Where is the, trying to foster intelligence, foster creativity, foster, all the types of things you're talking about. It really, really needs to be brought. And I think that, there are opportunities. AI does not have to be a problem, but I think we have to choose how we're going to use it. And we have to, you have to use it, wisely, reason through what we're planning to do with it. Whereas, are you guys familiar with all the Sora 2 videos and some of the stuff that's oh my God. It's
I saw this Elon Musk, Sam Altman cage fight or something today, fighting about, but it's like, I am actually interested in how these sort of tools will help us create movies as well, Jeff. So like,
yeah. Here's where I am. Like I'm very concerned about it as a creative person. I think that, the idea of removing there are plenty of studios that don't respect artists. And the idea of saying, hey, we can just hire somebody who can write prompts and we don't have to worry about paying those pesky writers and craftspeople and actors and anything anymore. I think that's awful. However, I have an animated series called Parallel Man that we've struggled for a lot of years trying to, it's been extremely well received, but getting a studio to come in and put money behind a new idea, like that's been a real challenge for us. And I've been approached by a group about the idea of developing an AI, pipeline to do animation. And the thing that's really neat that I like about what we're developing is the idea of having humans in the loop at every single level. So in other words, we wouldn't go to the AI and say, create this character for me. What we do is we hire a human artist who designs and illustrates the character. And then we have the AI train based upon all the design work that we created. Now, I think that's really interesting, right? So in other words, we have humans writing the stories, humans doing the VO, the voiceover work, humans doing all those different aspects, but the AI becomes a companion for us to streamline it and complete
a production tool.
a production tool. That's different. That's not a crutch. That's not replacing it. That's actually enabling us to bring the cost way down even further. And I think that's very exciting. So that may be, we're hoping that if we can build this could become a model of where the human AI interaction could be, we're uplifting ourselves with it, as opposed to saying, let's use this to just replace people. I can't do that. I would never do that. Yeah.
No, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Kevin, what do you think? Let's get a bit sci-fi.
Well, I want to throw, this will be sci-fi, but I want to throw a different one of Jeffrey's other passions we haven't mentioned before. He did a short film called Oceanus, and he's fascinated with undersea and domed settlements under the water. And why don't you tell us a little bit about Oceanus, because I know that's another project you got on the middle burner and think about the oceans and the future of the ocean for us.
I mean, I think the idea of living underwater, I mean, obviously there've been less people to the deepest parts of the ocean, down to the deepest parts of the ocean, than have been on the surface of the moon at this point, right? And it's there's an unexplored world down there. There's all kinds of amazing things to see and discover and to work with down there. And I think, I saw a show when I was little called Sea Lab 2020. It was an animated cartoon, Saturday morning cartoon. And the whole idea of people living and working in an underwater city, that always stuck with me. And it's something that I feel like is unexplored. We've had plenty of stories about space, but the idea of this inner space adventure, So a few years back, I did a short film called Oceanus, which is about an underwater city and a disaster on the surface, which makes the underwater city kind of a place of a haven, a safe haven in a way. But we want to take that and go further with it and turn it into maybe TV series, feature films, that sort of thing. So that's a world that I've spent a lot of time on, done a ton of design work and that sort of thing. And it's a fun possibility. So yeah, thanks.
I enjoyed Stephen Baxter's Flood series, where he, and one of that was that, they built an ark, like in space, a spaceship, and the later series focused on that. But a part of it was also building a undersea, underwater sort of, survival community of leading scientists and things like that. So.
Mm-hmm. I read those books. I'm a huge Stephen Baxter fan, so he's one of my favorite authors. So yeah, that's great. Yeah, those were good.
That's very cool. So let's talk about the far future. Let's try and think about 20 to 30 years out, Jeffrey, and bringing your skills as creative in this, but also someone that sort of lives in this, and maybe harking back to the Eagle. I see you've got it behind you there, the model, up on the shelf. But is there a possibility, given what Elon's doing with the Starship and things like that, and the Artemis program to go back to the moon? Do you think in 20 to 30 years that we'll start to have colonies like Alpha Base, wasn't it? Moon Base Alpha, right?
From Space 1999. Here's what I think, and it's sad. Here's where I think it's gonna happen. I think China, their space program is advancing very quickly, and they really have, I think, more control of what they're doing than people know. They're really on a path. And I think that the idea of them setting boots on the moon and get this, I think that's going to motivate a new space race. I think that's already in the works.
Yeah.
And I think that what's going to happen is we are going to end up with some space stations, some colonies on the moon, some limited stuff, but it's going to be driven by, unfortunately, it initially may be driven for the wrong reasons, for the reasons of competition and political reasons. But I mean,
that's what got Apollo to happen. So
yeah, I was going to go to the next thing, which was to say that, but that's okay because it'll get us back out there. Right. And
I watched an interesting YouTube documentary on the Chinese space station recently, and it's the most advanced space station we have in orbit right now. Mm-hmm. And they have wirelessly connected devices, so they have a lot more usable space, even though the diameter or the dimensions of the primary, habitable area and so forth are roughly similar to the ISS, but they don't have any cables to run, right? So because it's all wirelessly controlled stuff, so that gives them a lot more space in the space station. They have the lights that sort of keep a circadian rhythm, so they are on Chinese time. So the sun blooms in the morning, and you have dusk at night, controlled by in the environmental controls and stuff like that. So, and they have been, pretty disciplined about advancing their space program. It'll be interesting to see if this does spur on some real competition, particularly when they get boots on the moon. I think it's going to be a game changer, as you said.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, and I just think it's going to be an interesting time. So believe me, I wasn't trying to say that look, anything that gets us out there and moving is good in a way. I mean, aside from war, right? An actual war, I think that would be bad. But look, the idea of like, um, hopefully what will happen this time is we'll be up there and we'll stay. We'll be up there to stay, and that will lead to all kinds of possibilities that, right. And once the cost goes down and it becomes more accessible and all those things occur, we're going to be in much better chance for actual science to become the driving factor, and then maybe we could get some artists and some poets up there and some educators up there, and you know what I mean. It's not just going to be, so I think there's all kinds of possibilities, and I do think that I'm just stating that's where I think it will start, as far as getting us back there.
Well, and some of the good stuff with like Elon and SpaceX and things is doing it for commercial reasons instead of political reasons. And tourism is if not the biggest industry on planet Earth, it's one of the biggest industries on planet Earth, and people will pay to have their honeymoon up in orbit and stuff like that. So that could drive things, because obviously pure science and altruism wasn't enough to do it. So political space race might do it, but also commercial race might do it. Like who has the first Club Med on the moon? And
right. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
is Club Med still a thing?
I don't know. I flew Pan Am back from Dubai, Brett. So 2001: A Space Odyssey, where it was the spaceships were Pan Am spaceships that went up there.
Yeah. No, somewhat. They're reportedly bringing Pan Am back as a brand. There's been some talk about that, but hey, listen, we're running out of time, gents. But Jeffrey, super interesting. Obviously, we've got the Eagle Obsession documentary. It's eagledocumentary.com if you want to go check it out. And where is the best place to watch the documentary, Jeffrey?
Well, the documentary is not in wide release yet, so we're still. So I would say if you check eagledocumentary.com, you'll start to see how we're still. We have another screening set in Los Angeles on November 13th. I will be at the Raw Science Film Festival in New York City that's coming up this coming Friday. We'll be showing it there, the Triad Theater in New York. So so you'll see all that stuff on the website. But yeah, hopefully we'll have our distribution. We're trying to do a theatrical release initially of the film, nice. and then go to major streaming service.
Streaming, fantastic. And where can people find out more about what you're working on?
I would suggest you go check out futuredude.com. Future Dude. It was a blog that I did for fun, and the name caught on, so I kind of renamed my production company around that. So yeah, it's kind of fun. Yeah.
And I'll ask you both this: what is the sequel to Persephone look like in terms of the story? Are you guys thinking about that?
It's already written. The screenplay's already written, and it's called Valkyrie, and it really deals with the idea that there are some other ships out there and other humans that arrive that don't have the same agenda for the planet.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Great.
In fact, we had 3 movies planned, right? I mean, overall it was meant to be a trilogy. So
yes, yeah. So we'll see what happens. I want to get the first ones in here, but we'll see what happens.
And Kevin, you're always doing interesting stuff. What are you working on at the moment?
Well, just right this month, the trade paperback of my my science fiction cosmic horror novel called Nether Station comes out. That was nominated for the Colorado Book Award and for the Dragon Award. I love it. It's a scary science fiction thing like Alien or Event Horizon, and I don't think there's enough scary science fiction stuff because it's scary if you're up in a space station that's 9 months away from rescue and things could go wrong. So there's that, and I've got the Dune Prophecy TV show. The second season is in production right now, and we're working on that. And the Dune Messiah movie is filming. So I'm keeping busy.
Exciting.
Very
Well, thank you, Jeffrey, for joining us, and Kevin for adding your voice as host and being back on the show. I think it's great to see us sort of paying respect to the sci-fi that's come before that helped us envisage a world of technical possibility that now is really possible, particularly with AI and things like that. So it'd be nice to sort of start resurrecting some of that stuff and saying, what can we really do with these technical tools and capabilities that we're bringing? And it's of course it's good to see players like SpaceX and so forth experimenting with it as well. But thank you both for joining the Futurists this week.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, that's it for the Futurists this week. Stay tuned. We'll have another amazing guest next week to talk about the world that is emerging in the future. But until then, there's only one thing left to say. We'll see you in the future.
Well, that's it for the Futurists this week. If you like the show, we sure hope you did. Please subscribe and share it with the people in your community. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. That really helps other people find the show. And you can ping us anytime on Instagram and Twitter at Futurist Podcast for the folks that you'd like to see on the show or the questions that you'd like us to ask. Thanks for joining. And as always, we'll see you in the future.